The Red Bluff Greyhound station sits on a corner of Main Street, a small building with plate glass windows and a ticket counter inside. On August 9th, 1984, at 10:30 in the morning, a young woman stands at that counter purchasing a one-way ticket to Sacramento. She is 27 years old with long brown hair. She wears simple clothing that hangs loose on her thin frame. Behind her, a few feet back, stands another woman, older, watching her, waiting. The ticket agent processes the purchase. He counts out change. He slides the ticket across the counter. The young woman takes it with hands that shake slightly. She turns toward the door. She expects something to happen. She expects men in suits to appear. She expects agents from a powerful organization to stop her, to drag her back, to punish her for this act of defiance. She has been told for 7 years that this organization exists. She has been told they watch everything. She has been told they will kill her family if she tries to escape. She walks to the door, and no one stops her from leaving. She walks outside into the morning sun, and no agents appear to block her path. She stands on the sidewalk, breathing the free air. The older woman follows her out. The older woman speaks. You see, there is no company. There never was. He lied to you about everything. The young woman's name is Colleen Stan. For the past 7 years, she has been a slave. Not in the metaphorical sense. Not in the sense of difficult employment or oppressive circumstances. She has been an actual slave, kept in a wooden box, tortured regularly, controlled completely by a man who convinced her that escape was impossible and that her family would die if she tried. For 7 years, she believed a lie so thoroughly that freedom itself became unthinkable. The question that would later consume investigators, prosecutors, psychologists, and the public was simple: why didn't she just leave? She had opportunities. She worked a job alongside normal people. She made phone calls to her family. She even visited her family once, spending a week with them in Oregon, and then returned voluntarily to her captivity. How does a human mind become so controlled that a person can walk free and still choose to return to slavery? The answer begins 7 years earlier on a stretch of California highway on a spring day in 1977. Colleen Stan is 20 years old on May 19, 1977. She lives in Eugene, Oregon, working odd jobs and trying to figure out her life like most 20-year-olds do. Her friend is having a birthday party in Westwood, California, a small town about 300 miles south. Colleen decides to hitchhike to the party. This is not unusual in 1977. Hitchhiking is common, especially among young people traveling on limited budgets. The highways are full of travelers with thumbs out, and most rides pass without incident. Colleen leaves Eugene in the morning. She stands on the shoulder of Highway 99 heading south with her thumb out. Several cars pass before one stops. She looks at the driver and makes a quick judgment call. The driver is alone, male. Something about him feels wrong. She declines the ride politely. The car drives away. She waits for the next one. This pattern repeats several times throughout the morning. A car stops. Colleen evaluates the situation. Something feels off. The driver seems intoxicated or too eager, or the car contains too many people. She declines. She waits. She is being careful. Her instincts are good. She trusts her gut about which rides to accept and which to refuse. By early afternoon, she has made it to Red Bluff, California, about halfway to her destination. She is standing on Highway 299, a two-lane road that cuts through rural Northern California. Traffic is lighter here. The sun is hot. She has been waiting for over an hour when a blue Dodge van pulls onto the shoulder ahead of her. The van backs up until it is alongside her. The driver's window rolls down. A young man looks out. He is in his early 20s, with dark hair and a friendly smile. Next to him in the passenger seat sits a young woman, maybe 19 years old. In the back seat, visible through the van windows, is a baby in a car seat. The young man asks where she is heading. Colleen tells him Westwood. The man says they are heading south too and can give her a ride for part of the way. Colleen looks at the scene before her. A couple with a baby presents the safest-looking ride she has seen all day. Families do not abduct hitchhikers. Women with babies do not participate in violence. This is the calculation she makes in the few seconds before accepting the ride. She opens the side door of the van. She climbs in behind the passenger seat. She closes the door. The van pulls back onto the highway heading south. The young man introduces himself as Cameron. The young woman is his wife, Janice. The baby is their daughter. They make small talk. The conversation is normal and friendly. Cameron asks about her life. Colleen tells him about the birthday party, about Eugene, about her plans. Janice says little but smiles occasionally. The baby makes baby noises from the car seat. They drive for perhaps 30 minutes. The landscape outside is rural, hills, trees, scattered ranches. Traffic is sparse. Then Cameron signals and turns off the highway onto a smaller road. Colleen asks where they are going. Cameron says they need to stop at a friend's place real quick to pick something up. It will only take a minute. Colleen feels a small flutter of unease but suppresses it. These people have a baby. They are a family. It is fine. The smaller road becomes a dirt road. The dirt road leads into woods where no houses are visible and no other vehicles pass. The van drives deeper into the trees. Colleen's unease grows. She asks again where they are going. Cameron does not answer. He keeps driving. The van stops in a clearing surrounded by trees where no buildings stand and no people can be seen. Cameron turns off the engine. Silence fills the van except for the sounds of birds and wind. Colleen starts to speak. Cameron turns around in his seat to face her. He is holding a knife. The knife is large with a fixed blade. He points it at her throat. Do exactly what I say or I will kill you. Colleen freezes. Her mind cannot process the sudden shift from normal conversation to this moment. The knife is inches from her face. Cameron's expression has changed completely. The friendliness is gone. His eyes are cold and focused. Janice sits in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead. She does not look at Colleen. She does not react. The baby makes a small sound. Cameron opens a wooden box that was sitting on the floor of the van. The box is roughly cube-shaped, maybe 18 inches on each side. The inside is lined with carpet or fabric. Cameron tells Colleen to put her head into the box. She does not move. He pushes the knife closer to her throat. She leans forward. He places the box over her head. The world goes completely dark. The head box is designed to eliminate all light and muffle all sound. Colleen cannot see anything. She can barely hear. She can breathe through small holes in the wood, but the air is stale and hot. She is still sitting in the van back seat with this box on her head, unable to see, unable to understand what is happening. She feels hands on her arms. Cameron is binding her wrists with rope. She feels him binding her ankles. She tries to speak, but the sound is muffled by the box. He tells her to be quiet. She feels herself being moved. She is laid down on the floor of the van. The van doors close. The engine starts. The van begins moving. The drive lasts a long time. Colleen has no way to measure it. She is on the floor of the van with the head box on and her limbs bound. The van turns, accelerates, slows, turns again. She feels every bump in the road. She tries to track the route in her mind, but loses orientation quickly. Time becomes meaningless in the darkness. She has no idea if they have been driving for 30 minutes or 3 hours. At some point, the van stops. The engine turns off. She hears doors opening. She feels hands grabbing her. She is pulled out of the van. She is standing now or trying to stand with her ankles bound. The headbox remains on. Someone, Cameron, speaks near her ear. He tells her she is going to cooperate. He tells her she is going to do exactly what he says. He tells her that if she screams or fights, he will hurt her worse than she can imagine. She feels rope being thrown over something above her head. She feels the rope being attached to the bindings on her wrists. Then she feels herself being pulled upward. The rope is pulling her wrists up, stretching her arms higher and higher. Her arms are over her head now, stretched tight. The rope continues pulling until her toes leave the ground. She is hanging by her wrists with the head box still on, unable to see, unable to make sense of what is happening to her. Then the whipping starts. The first blow lands across her back. The pain is sharp and immediate. She cries out. The sound is muffled by the box. Another blow strikes her body and then another. The whip is leather, thick and heavy. It strikes her back, her legs, her arms. She is twisting and turning, trying to escape the blows, but she is hanging in the air with nowhere to go. The whipping continues for a time she cannot measure. 10 blows, 20, 30. She stops counting. She stops thinking. There is only pain and darkness and the sound of her own muffled screaming inside the box. Finally, it stops. She hangs there breathing hard, sobbing, her body on fire with pain. She feels herself being lowered. Her feet touch ground. The rope binding her wrists is loosened but not removed. She is moved again. She is being placed inside something, a larger box or crate. She is folded into it with her knees bent and her arms at her sides. It is tight. She can barely move. A lid closes over her, creating darkness within darkness. The head box is still on her head, and now she is inside a larger container. She hears the van doors close again. The engine starts. The van is moving. She is in a crate in the back of the van with a box on her head, driving to an unknown destination. She has gone from standing on a highway in the sunshine to this hell in less than 2 hours. Her mind rejects the reality. This cannot be happening. But the pain in her back says it is. The drive continues. Colleen lies in the crate and tries to understand. She tries to think of a reason. She tries to make sense of who these people are and what they want. She cannot. There is no sense to find. She is simply being transported like cargo to some destination for some purpose she cannot fathom. Eventually, after what feels like hours but might be less, the van stops. The engine turns off. She hears doors opening. She hears voices speaking to each other in low tones she cannot make out. She hears footsteps. The back doors of the van open. Hands reach in. The crate is moved. She feels herself being carried. She hears a door open. She is inside a building now. She can tell by the change in sound, the slight echo of voices. She is taken out of the crate. She is standing again with the head box still on. Cameron begins to speak. His voice is calm now, conversational, as if they are discussing ordinary things. He tells her she is in his home. He tells her she is going to live here now. He tells her she belongs to him. He uses that word specifically, belong. She is his property. He is her master. She will call him master. She will obey every command he gives her. If she obeys, she will be fed and allowed to live. If she disobeys, she will be punished. The punishments will be severe. He describes some of the punishments in detail: whipping, electric shock, starvation, extended time in small spaces. He speaks about these things in the same calm tone one might use to explain the rules of a board game. Then he tells her about the company. The company, Cameron explains, is a large and powerful organization that deals in slavery. The company operates throughout California and beyond. The company has many members, wealthy people, influential people, people in positions of authority. The company owns slaves. Cameron works for the company. He has been authorized by the company to acquire slaves for training and use. Colleen has now been registered with the company as a slave. Her information has been entered into their system. The company knows who she is. The company knows who her family is. The company is watching her family right now. If she tries to escape, the company will know immediately. If she tries to contact anyone for help, the company will know. And if she does either of those things, the company will kill her entire family, her parents, her siblings, her friends, all of them. The company has done this before. The company does not hesitate. The company always follows through on its promises. Cameron tells her she will sign a contract. The contract will outline the terms of her slavery. By signing it, she agrees to serve him as master. She agrees to obey all commands. She agrees to accept all punishments. The contract is legally binding. She will be a registered slave. There is no point in trying to escape because the company will simply find her and bring her back and her family will be killed for her disobedience. Does she understand? Colleen, still in the head box, still in pain from the whipping, still in shock from the entire experience, says yes, she understands. She does not understand at all. Nothing makes sense. But she says yes because a man is telling her that her family will die if she does not cooperate, and she has just been whipped while hanging by her wrists, and she is terrified beyond the capacity for rational thought. Cameron removes the head box. Colleen sees her surroundings for the first time since entering the van. She is in a bedroom. The room is small and cluttered. There is a waterbed against one wall. There is a dresser. There are clothes on the floor. This is a normal bedroom in what appears to be a normal home. Through the doorway, she can see a hallway, a bathroom, signs of ordinary domestic life. The cognitive dissonance is overwhelming. She was just whipped in the woods and transported in a crate, and now she is standing in someone's bedroom as if this is a normal situation. Cameron hands her a piece of paper and a pen. The paper has text on it, typed formal-looking. It is titled Slavery Contract. The document lists rules. It lists obligations. It lists punishments for infractions. There is a space at the bottom for a signature. Colleen reads it. The words make no sense. This cannot be real. But Cameron is standing there with the knife still in his hand. Janice is standing in the doorway watching. The baby is somewhere in another room crying. Everything about this situation is impossible, but it is happening anyway. Cameron tells her to sign. She signs. Cameron takes the paper. He tells her she is now officially his slave. He tells her she will live in a special place he has prepared for her. He tells her she will spend most of her time there. He walks to the waterbed. He lifts the frame. Underneath the waterbed, built into the space where a bed frame would normally be, is a wooden box. The box measures approximately 2 feet wide, 3 feet long, and 2 feet high. It is made of plywood with an unfinished interior and no padding. There are small air holes drilled in the sides. This box is where she will sleep. This box is where she will spend 23 hours of every day. She will be let out for 1 hour to use the bathroom, to eat a small amount of food, to stretch. Then she will return to the box. Cameron tells her to get in. Colleen looks at the box. She looks at Cameron. She looks at Janice standing in the doorway. Janice's expression is blank. She is not protesting. She is not helping. She is simply watching as if this is ordinary, as if helping her husband imprison a woman in a box under their bed is something a wife does. Colleen gets into the box. She has to curl her body with her knees bent and her shoulders hunched. She fits inside barely. There is no room to move. Cameron closes the lid. Darkness falls over her like a blanket. She hears the waterbed frame being lowered over the box. She hears footsteps walking away. She hears a door close. She is in a box under a waterbed in a stranger's house in a location she does not know. The date is May 19th, 1977. She is 20 years old. She has been in captivity for less than 6 hours. She will remain in captivity for 7 years. The box under the waterbed becomes Colleen's world. The dimensions do not change. 2 feet wide, 3 feet long, 2 feet high. She cannot sit up straight. She cannot stretch her legs fully. She can only lie in a fetal position or remain curled on her side. The darkness is absolute. Not dim, not shadowy, absolute. When the lid closes, no light enters. Her eyes stay open or closed, and it makes no difference. She cannot see her own hand in front of her face. The air is stale and hot. The small holes drilled in the sides allow minimal ventilation. In summer, the temperature inside the box rises. She sweats constantly. The moisture has nowhere to go. Her clothes become damp and then stay damp. In winter, the box is cold. The mobile home's heating system does not reach inside the box. She shivers for hours, unable to warm herself, unable to move enough to generate heat. She can hear them living above her. The waterbed sits directly on top of the box, with only a thin plywood lid separating her from the mattress. When Cameron and Janice lie on the bed, she can feel the weight pressing down. When they have sex, and they have sex frequently directly above her, She can hear every sound. The bed frame creaks. They talk to each other. Sometimes they argue. Sometimes Janice cries. Sometimes they discuss ordinary things like bills to pay, groceries to buy, and repairs the mobile home needs. The baby cries. Colleen hears the baby crying in the next room, hears Janice getting up to feed her, hears Cameron telling Janice to keep the baby quiet. The baby's name is Dawn. Colleen learns this from listening. Dawn is less than a year old. Dawn is growing up in a home where a woman lives in a box under her parents' bed. Dawn will never know this. The normalization of horror is complete. Once per day, Cameron lets Colleen out. The timing varies. Sometimes morning, sometimes afternoon, sometimes evening. There is no pattern she can predict. She lies in the darkness waiting for the sound of the waterbed frame being lifted. When it comes, light floods in. Even the dim light of the mobile home bedroom is blinding after 23 hours of absolute darkness. Her eyes cannot adjust quickly. She squints and turns her head away. Cameron tells her to get out. She unfolds her body. Every joint is stiff. Every muscle aches. She has been in the same position for 23 hours. Movement is painful. She climbs out of the box slowly. She stands in the bedroom. Her legs shake. Sometimes they give out and she falls. Cameron does not help her. He watches. He waits. She is allowed to use the bathroom. The bathroom is adjacent to the bedroom. She walks the few steps, uses the toilet, drinks water from the sink. She is not allowed to shower during this time. Showers happen once per week, maybe less. Cameron supervises when they do occur. He watches her shower. He tells her to wash quickly. There is no privacy. There is no modesty. These concepts cease to have meaning. After the bathroom, she is given food. The food is minimal. A slice of bread, a small amount of whatever Janice cooked for dinner, sometimes leftovers from days ago, sometimes nothing but water. She eats quickly. She drinks as much water as she can because she will not have water again for 23 hours. The box has no toilet. She holds her bladder for the entire time in the box. This becomes agonizing. She learns to control her body's functions in ways she did not know were possible. The hour ends quickly, far too quickly. Cameron tells her to get back in the box. She gets back in. The lid closes. Darkness returns. The waterbed frame lowers. Weight presses down. She hears their footsteps walking away. She lies in the darkness and waits for the next day. This routine continues every day for 3 years. The 1 hour per day outside the box is not always just for bathroom and food. Some days Cameron has other plans. These are the torture sessions. The frequency varies, sometimes twice per week, sometimes daily for a stretch, sometimes not for weeks. The unpredictability is part of the control. She never knows if today will be a torture day until Cameron's hands pull her from the box and lead her not to the bathroom, but to another room. The torture room is a bedroom converted for this purpose. Cameron has installed hooks in the ceiling. He has built devices, a rack, a suspension system, restraints. He has collected implements including whips, paddles, and electrodes. He has studied torture. He has read books on interrogation techniques used on prisoners of war. He has researched psychological conditioning. This is not spontaneous sadism. This is planned and methodical. He hangs her from the ceiling by her wrists. Her toes touch the floor, or they do not depending on how high he raises her. He leaves her hanging for hours. The pain in her shoulders becomes unbearable. Her arms go numb. Her hands swell. She begs him to let her down. He does not respond. He leaves the room and leaves her hanging. When he returns, he whips her. The whip is thick leather with multiple strands braided together. It strikes her back, her legs, her arms. The pain is sharp and immediate. She screams. The head box is often placed over her head during these sessions to muffle the sound. The electric shocks are worse than the whipping. Cameron has fashioned electrodes from household items. He attaches them to sensitive areas, her fingers, her breasts, her genitals. He has a control box with a dial. He turns the dial. Electricity courses through her body. The pain is unlike anything else. It is not localized. It is everywhere and nowhere. Her muscles contract violently. She cannot control her body's response. She convulses. She loses control of her bladder. The shocks last seconds but feel like hours. Cameron built a rack. It is crude but functional. She is strapped to a flat board with her wrists and ankles secured with rope. He turns a crank. The ropes tighten. Her body is stretched. The sensation starts as discomfort and escalates to agony. Her joints feel like they are pulling apart. She thinks her bones will separate. She begs him to stop. He does not stop. He asks her questions while she is stretched on the rack. Questions about obedience. Questions about whether she understands that she is his property. Questions about whether she will ever try to escape. She answers yes, yes, yes to everything. The answers do not matter. The stretching continues. Sometimes Janice participates. Cameron orders her to whip Colleen. Janice obeys. Her strikes are not as hard as Cameron's. Her heart is not in it. Colleen can tell the difference. But Janice still does it. She stands there with the whip in her hand and strikes another woman because her husband tells her to. Afterward, Janice's face shows guilt and misery, but she never refuses Cameron's orders. She never intervenes to stop the torture. She is present and complicit. The torture sessions last anywhere from 1 hour to 6 hours. When they end, Cameron returns Colleen to the box. She lies in the darkness, bleeding from the whip marks, trembling from the electric shocks, her joints aching from the rack. She has no medical care. She has no bandages. Her body heals slowly on its own or does not heal. Scars accumulate. Pain becomes a constant background state of existence. The purpose of the torture is not primarily sexual for Cameron, though there is a sexual element. The purpose is control. The torture reinforces the power dynamic. It reinforces that she is property. It reinforces that resistance is futile. It breaks down her sense of self. It erases the person she was before May 19, 1977, and replaces that person with a slave who obeys. And it works. Over the course of 3 years in the box under the waterbed, with regular torture sessions interspersed throughout, Colleen's psychological state changes. The woman who refused unsafe rides on the highway, who trusted her instincts, who had agency and autonomy, that woman disappears. What remains is someone who obeys automatically, someone who does not consider resistance, someone who calls a man master and means it. The contract Colleen signed on the first day is not a one-time formality. Cameron uses it as an ongoing tool of control. He makes her read it aloud. He quizzes her on the rules. He references it when punishing her. The contract becomes a psychological anchor, physical proof that this situation is official and binding. The contract lists her obligations clearly. She must obey all commands immediately. She must refer to Cameron as master at all times. She must accept all punishments without resistance. She must perform any sexual acts master requires. She must maintain absolute secrecy about the company. She must never attempt to escape or contact outside parties. The contract lists punishments for infractions with equal clarity. Minor infractions result in whipping, extended time in the box, or food restriction. Major infractions result in electric shock, time on the rack, or suspension from the ceiling. Escape attempts will result in death after torture, followed by elimination of family members. The contract includes a clause about the company. By signing, she acknowledged that she understands the company's rules. She acknowledged that she understands the consequences of disobedience. She acknowledged that her family will be killed if she violates the terms. Cameron reinforces the company lie constantly. He tells her stories about other slaves. He describes how the company operates. He explains the network of members throughout California. He shows her photographs of women in bondage, women being tortured. He says these are other company slaves. The photographs are from pornography magazines, but Colleen has no way to know this. She has no frame of reference. She is completely isolated. He tells her that company representatives sometimes visit to inspect the slaves. He tells her that one day representatives may come to inspect her. She must be prepared to demonstrate perfect obedience. If she fails the inspection, she will be taken to company headquarters, where the torture is worse than anything Cameron does. This threat hangs over her constantly. She lives in fear not just of Cameron, but of this larger organization she believes is watching her. The psychological manipulation is sophisticated. Cameron did not invent these techniques spontaneously. He studied them. Before kidnapping Colleen, he read extensively about brainwashing, cult indoctrination, and prisoner of war interrogation methods. He learned how to break down a person's identity and rebuild it according to his specifications. The company lie is based on documented brainwashing techniques. Create an external threat that is omnipresent and omnipotent. Make the captor appear as a protector against an even worse fate. And isolate the victim completely from any contradicting information. It works because Colleen has no access to reality checks. She never sees a television. She never hears a radio. She never sees a newspaper. She never speaks to anyone except Cameron and occasionally Janice. Her entire reality is contained within the walls of the mobile home and primarily within the walls of a box under a bed. In that reality, the company exists because Cameron says it exists. In that reality, her family will die if she disobeys because Cameron says they will die. 3 years pass this way. Colleen turns 21 in the box. She turns 22 in the box. She turns 23 in the box. Her body changes dramatically. She loses weight, dropping from 120 pounds to less than 100 pounds. Her muscles atrophy from lack of use. Her skin becomes pale from lack of sunlight. Her hair grows long and unkempt. Her mind changes too. The psychological conditioning is complete. She is no longer a kidnap victim waiting for rescue. She is a slave who obeys. In 1980, Cameron makes a decision. He decides to let Colleen out of the box more frequently. This is not mercy. This is a psychological experiment. He has broken her completely inside the box. Now he wants to test whether the control will hold outside the box. He wants to see if he can let her move freely in the house, give her access to the outside world, and still maintain complete control through psychological conditioning rather than physical imprisonment. He starts slowly. He lets her out for 2 hours per day instead of 1, then 3 hours, then 4. She is still sleeping in the box. That does not change. But during the day, she is allowed to be out in the mobile home. She cleans. She does laundry. She helps Janice with childcare. She becomes a part of the household routine. Janice and Cameron now have 2 children. A son was born in 1978 while Colleen was in the box. The children see Colleen moving around the house. They do not know her history. They do not know about the box. They see her as a helper, a presence in the home, something normal. The children play. Colleen watches them play. The cognitive dissonance is extreme. She is a slave living in a box, and she is also watching children play with toys in a living room like any babysitter might. Cameron decides to take the experiment further. He decides to get Colleen a job. This seems insane on its face. Why would a kidnapper allow his victim to work outside the home? But Cameron's psychological control is so complete that he believes she will not run. He believes she will work a job, interact with normal people, have opportunities to escape, and still return to him because she believes the company will kill her family if she does not. He is correct. In early 1981, Colleen starts working as a motel maid in Red Bluff. The motel is a small local establishment, nothing fancy. Cameron drives her to work in the morning. She clocks in. She cleans rooms for 8 hours. She talks to co-workers. She talks to her supervisor. She is polite and quiet and does her job adequately. Cameron picks her up after her shift. She gets in the van. He drives her back to the mobile home. She goes back into the box. The co-workers notice nothing unusual. They see a quiet young woman who does her job and does not talk much about her personal life. This is not particularly remarkable. Plenty of people are quiet. Plenty of people keep to themselves. There is nothing in her demeanor that screams kidnap victim. She has been conditioned so thoroughly that she presents as normal. She makes eye contact. She smiles when appropriate. She follows instructions. She functions, but inside she is terrified every moment. She is terrified that she will make a mistake. She is terrified that someone will ask her the wrong question and she will not know how to answer without revealing the truth. She is terrified that if she reveals the truth, the company will find out and her family will be killed. So she says nothing. She works her shifts. She earns minimum wage. Cameron keeps all the money. Cameron allows her to make phone calls to her family. This seems even more insane than the job. He hands her the telephone. He dials the number. He hands her the receiver. She talks to her mother. She talks to her father. She tells them she is fine. She tells them she is living in Red Bluff. She tells them she has a job. She does not tell them she is a slave living in a box. She does not tell them she is beaten and tortured regularly. She does not tell them to call the police. Why not? Because Cameron is sitting next to her, listening to every word. Because he has coached her before the call on exactly what to say. Because she believes that the moment she says anything that deviates from the script, the company will be notified and her family will be killed. The calls are brief. They are superficial. Her family hears her voice and assumes she is okay. They have no reason to think otherwise. Young people in 1981 often move away from home, work odd jobs, live their lives without constant contact with family. This is normal. Then Cameron allows something that seems incomprehensible. He allows Colleen to visit her family in person. In 1981, he gives her permission to take a bus to Eugene, Oregon, to visit her family for a week. He drives her to the bus station. He buys her a ticket. He gives her spending money. He watches her get on the bus. She gets on the bus and travels to Oregon alone. She arrives at her family's home. They are happy to see her. They hug her. They ask about her life. She tells them a story. She tells them she is working in Red Bluff. She tells them she has a boyfriend. She tells them everything is fine. They see that she looks thin. They see that she seems nervous and jumpy. They ask if something is wrong. She says no, everything is fine. She spends a week with them. She sleeps in her old bedroom. She eats meals with her family. She could tell them the truth. She could tell them everything. She could ask them to call the police. She could refuse to leave. But she does not. She goes through the motions of a normal visit. She reassures them that she is okay. When the week is over, she takes the bus back to Red Bluff. Cameron picks her up at the bus station. He asks if she told anyone. She says no. He believes her because it is true. He drives her back to the mobile home. She goes back into the box. She returned voluntarily to her captivity. This is the moment when the psychological control reveals itself as absolute. She had a week of freedom. She had access to help. She chose not to use it. She chose to return. Her family would later say they noticed she seemed different. They noticed she seemed scared. But they did not push. They did not investigate. They had no reason to suspect their daughter was a slave. She gave them no reason to suspect it. The psychological conditioning held even when physical imprisonment did not exist. In 1982, Cameron decides to upgrade Colleen's living situation. This is how he frames it, an upgrade. He builds a new box in the shed behind the mobile home. The shed is a small outbuilding used for storage. Cameron clears space and constructs a larger box. This box is approximately 4 feet wide, 6 feet long, and 3 feet high. It is bigger than the box under the waterbed, but still not tall enough to stand in. She can lie down fully extended. She can sit up if she hunches. It is still a box. Cameron adds features to this box that the previous one lacked. He installs a small shelf where she can keep a few personal items. He installs hooks where she can hang clothes. He allows her to decorate the walls with pictures cut from magazines. She cuts out pictures of landscapes and animals and peaceful scenes. She tapes them to the plywood walls. The box becomes a grotesque parody of a bedroom, a prison cell decorated to look like a room. The move to the shed box represents a shift in Cameron's psychology. He is treating her more like a possession he is maintaining than like a victim he is torturing. The torture sessions become less frequent. They do not stop entirely, but they decrease. He's no longer trying to break her. She is already broken. He is now managing his property. He lets her out of the box for longer periods. She spends more time in the house helping with chores and childcare. She still sleeps in the box every night. She still has no freedom. She still calls him master. She still believes in the company. But the nature of her captivity has shifted slightly. It is less about constant physical torture and more about sustained psychological control. Cameron has achieved what he set out to achieve, a slave who obeys without needing chains. Janice's role during this period is complex. She is still complicit in the captivity. She still helps maintain the lie. She still participates when Cameron orders her to. But she is also increasingly miserable. She has 2 young children now. She is raising those children in a home where a woman lives in a box in the shed. She knows this is wrong. She was raised Baptist. She was taught about sin and redemption. She is committing sins she cannot rationalize. Cameron beats Janice regularly. He has always been abusive toward her, but the abuse increases during this period. He hits her. He humiliates her. He controls her as thoroughly as he controls Colleen, though through different methods. Janice is not in a box, but she is imprisoned nonetheless. She is imprisoned by fear of Cameron, by economic dependence, by concern for her children, by shame about what they have done together. She starts reading the Bible more. She prays. She asks God for guidance. She feels guilty about Colleen. She feels guilty about the years of torture. She feels guilty about her own participation. The guilt builds. It does not lead to immediate action, but it plants seeds. Seeds that will eventually grow into the decision that ends Colleen's captivity. Meanwhile, Colleen exists in her new box in the shed. She has been in captivity for 5 years at this point. 5 years since that day on the highway when she accepted a ride from a couple with a baby. 5 years since her life ended and this other existence began. She no longer thinks about escape. Escape is not a concept that exists in her reality. She thinks about obeying. She thinks about avoiding punishment. She thinks about surviving each day. This is her life. This is all her life will ever be. She believes this completely, but outside forces are building that will change everything. Cameron's psychology is evolving in a direction that will finally be too much for Janice to tolerate. The seeds of doubt Janice has been nurturing are growing into conviction. The situation is approaching a breaking point. Colleen does not know this yet, but in early 1984, events will begin to unfold that will lead to her freedom. Cameron Hooker sits at the kitchen table in the mobile home on Oak Street in early 1984. Janice is washing dishes at the sink. The children are in the living room watching television. Colleen is in the shed box where she spends her nights. This is a normal evening in the Hooker household, at least by their standards. Cameron tells Janice he wants to talk about something important. She dries her hands on a dish towel. She sits down across from him. He has that look on his face, the look that means he has been thinking about something, planning something. She has seen this look before. It never leads anywhere good. He tells her he wants to get another girl. Janice does not respond immediately. She processes the words. Another girl means another woman like Colleen, another kidnapping, another person in a box, another slave. Cameron continues talking. He explains his reasoning. Colleen is well trained now. She obeys perfectly. The experiment with her has been successful. He wants to expand. He wants 2 slaves, maybe eventually more. He could build additional boxes in the shed. He could run a small operation. The company would approve. This is what company members do. Janice stares at him. The cognitive dissonance that has been building for 7 years reaches a critical point. She has participated in Colleen's captivity. She has helped torture her. She has maintained the lie. She has done terrible things. But this plan to kidnap another woman, to do it all again, to make it not an isolated horror, but a pattern, a lifestyle, this breaks something in her. She tells Cameron, no, she cannot do this again. She will not do this again. One is already too many. What they have done to Colleen is unforgivable. She knows this. She has known it for years, but she has suppressed the knowledge. She cannot suppress it anymore. Getting another girl would be crossing a line she cannot cross. Cameron is surprised by her resistance. Janice usually obeys him. She has obeyed him for 7 years of slavery, for years of abuse before that, for their entire marriage. He tells her she will obey this time too. He tells her this is happening whether she agrees or not. He will get another girl. She will help him. This is not a discussion. Janice does not back down. She says no again. She says she will not help him kidnap another woman. She says what they have done is wrong. She uses that word, wrong. It is the first time in 7 years she has named what they are doing as wrong out loud to his face. Cameron's expression changes. He is angry now. He stands up from the table. He hits her. She falls from her chair. The children in the other room hear the sound, but they do not come to investigate. They have learned not to investigate when their father is angry. Cameron leaves the house. Janice lies on the kitchen floor. Her face hurts where he hit her. But the physical pain is nothing compared to the psychological pain she has been carrying for 7 years. The guilt has been building. The religious conviction has been building. The sense that she is damned, that she is going to hell for what she has done, has been building. And now this, the plan to do it again, to make it worse, to expand the horror. This is the catalyst that forces her to act. She has been reading the Bible every night for months. She has been praying for guidance. She has been asking God what she should do. She knows what the Bible says about sin. She knows what the Bible says about redemption. She knows she cannot be forgiven unless she stops sinning and makes amends for what she has done. Freeing Colleen would be the first step toward atonement. But there is another motivation beyond religious guilt. There is self-preservation. If Cameron kidnaps another woman, the risk of exposure increases dramatically. 2 victims means twice the chance of someone escaping or being discovered. 2 victims means more complexity, more moving parts, more opportunities for something to go wrong. And if something goes wrong, Janice goes to prison. She loses her children. Her life is destroyed. She has immunity only if no one finds out. But if Cameron keeps escalating, someone will find out eventually. Janice is not stupid. She sees the trajectory. Cameron is not satisfied with one slave. He wants more. He wants to build an operation. This will end in disaster. And when it does, she will go down with him, so she makes a decision. She will free Colleen. She will do it before Cameron kidnaps another woman. She will do it in a way that minimizes her own legal exposure. She will tell Colleen the truth, that the company does not exist, that she can leave, that her family is safe. She will drive Colleen to a bus station. She will give her money. She will let her go. And then she will deal with the consequences with Cameron. The decision is made, but the execution is not simple. She cannot just tell Colleen the truth and expect her to believe it. Colleen has believed the company lie for 7 years. The psychological conditioning is deep. Simply saying it was all a lie will not be enough. Colleen might think this is a test. Colleen might think this is the company testing her loyalty. Janice will have to be convincing. She will have to prove it somehow. She waits for the right moment. She waits for a day when Cameron is at work. She waits until the children are occupied. She waits until her courage builds enough to actually go through with it. Days pass, weeks pass. Cameron is still talking about getting another girl. He is making plans. He is scouting locations. The clock is ticking. August 9, 1984 is a Thursday. Cameron leaves for work at the lumber mill at 7 in the morning. The children are still asleep. Janice waits until 8. She walks out to the shed behind the mobile home. She opens the shed door. She walks to the box. She opens the lid. Colleen is awake inside. She is always awake when the lid opens. She has learned to wake at the slightest sound. She looks up at Janice. She expects the usual routine. Janice will let her out. She will use the bathroom. She will eat something. She will return to the box. This is what happens every morning, but Janice's face looks different today. She looks nervous. She looks determined. She speaks. Colleen, I need to tell you something. Everything Cameron told you about the company was a lie. There is no company. There never was a company. He made it all up. Your family is safe. They have been safe this whole time. You can leave. You can go home. Colleen stares at her. The words do not make sense. The company is real. She has a contract with the company. She has seen photographs of other companies' slaves. Master works for the company. This is established fact. Janice must be confused or lying or testing her loyalty. She says as much. She says the company is real. She says she knows it is real. She says she cannot leave or they will kill her family. She says Janice is wrong. Janice expected this response. She speaks again. She speaks with conviction. I was there when he made it all up. I helped him kidnap you. I helped him keep you here. There is no company. It was just us. Just Cameron and me. We lied to you. We tortured you. We kept you in a box. But the company does not exist. I can prove it to you. I will drive you to the bus station right now. I will give you money. You can get on a bus. You can leave. If the company was real, they would stop you. But they will not stop you because they do not exist. Colleen processes this. Her mind is struggling. 7 years of conditioning do not disappear in one conversation. 7 years of believing that her family will die if she disobeys do not vanish because someone says they will not. Her psychological prison is stronger than the physical one ever was, but Janice is offering proof. She is offering to take her to a bus station. She is offering to let her leave. This is testable. If Colleen goes to the bus station and gets on a bus and the company does not appear, then maybe Janice is telling the truth. Maybe the company does not exist. Maybe she can actually leave, or maybe this is a test. Maybe the company told Janice to say these things to see if Colleen would try to escape. Maybe company agents are waiting at the bus station to capture her and torture her for attempting to run. Maybe her family will be killed the moment she steps onto that bus. Colleen does not know which scenario is true. She is frozen with indecision. But Janice is insistent. Janice tells her to get dressed. Janice tells her they are leaving now. Janice goes back into the mobile home and gets her car keys. She gets money from a drawer, about $50. She gets her purse. She goes back to the shed. Colleen is still sitting in the box, uncertain, terrified. Janice tells her to get out of the box. Colleen gets out. Janice tells her to come to the car. Colleen follows her. They walk to the car parked in the driveway. Janice opens the passenger door. Colleen gets in. Janice gets in the driver's seat. She starts the engine. She backs out of the driveway. She drives toward downtown Red Bluff. The drive takes 10 minutes. Colleen sits in the passenger seat expecting something to happen. She expects company vehicles to appear and force them off the road. She expects agents to materialize and drag her from the car. She expects intervention from the organization that has controlled her life for 7 years. Nothing happens. They drive through town. They pass other cars. Everything looks normal. Janice pulls into the parking lot of the Greyhound bus station. It is the same station from the cold open of this story. The same building with plate glass windows and a ticket counter inside. Janice parks. She turns off the engine. She looks at Colleen. You can go in there and buy a ticket. You can get on a bus. You can go anywhere you want. You can call your family. You can go home. The company will not stop you because the company does not exist. Do you understand? Colleen looks at the bus station. She looks at the door. She looks at the people walking past on the sidewalk, normal people living normal lives. She could get out of this car right now and walk into that building and buy a ticket and leave. Or she could stay in the car and go back to the mobile home and go back to the box. Because that is what Master expects her to do. 7 years of conditioning say, stay in the car. 7 years of fear say the company is watching. 7 years of obedience say, do not disobey Master. But something else says, get out of the car. Something else says, test whether Janice is telling the truth. Something else, some small part of Colleen that has survived 7 years in a box, says, try. She opens the car door. She steps out. Janice gets out too. They walk together to the entrance of the bus station. Colleen expects agents to appear. They do not. She walks through the door. She walks to the ticket counter. The agent behind the counter greets her normally. He asks where she wants to go. Colleen does not know where she wants to go. She has not thought this far ahead. She says Sacramento. She does not know why. Sacramento is a city. It is far from here. It seems like a safe answer. The agent asks what time. She says the next available bus. He checks the schedule. He tells her there is a bus leaving in 45 minutes. The ticket costs $38. Janice hands Colleen the money. Colleen hands it to the agent. He processes the transaction. He gives her a ticket and change. He tells her the bus will board from platform 3. This is the moment from the cold open. This is Colleen standing at the ticket counter with a ticket in her hand, and Janice standing behind her, and no company agents appearing to stop her. This is the moment when 7 years of psychological control begins to crack. She walks outside. Janice follows. They stand on the sidewalk. Janice tells her again that the company does not exist. Janice tells her she can call her father. Janice tells her she is free, and Janice gets in her car and drives away. She does not wait to see if Colleen actually gets on the bus. She has done what she needed to do. She has freed Colleen. The rest is up to Colleen. Colleen stands on the sidewalk holding a bus ticket. She looks around. No agents. No company vehicles. No intervention. Just a normal Thursday morning in Red Bluff, California. People walk past her. Cars drive past. A bus pulls into the station and people board. Life continues as if nothing extraordinary is happening, but everything extraordinary is happening. Colleen Stan is standing on a sidewalk holding a bus ticket to freedom. She is standing outside for the first time in 7 years without master's permission. She is standing in the world as a free person. The psychological chains that have bound her are breaking link by link. The company does not exist. Janice told her the truth. Master lied. Everything was a lie. She walks to platform 3. The bus is there. The driver's checking tickets. She hands him her ticket. He waves her aboard. She climbs the steps. She finds a seat. She sits down. She looks out the window. She expects something to happen. Nothing happens. The bus door closes. The engine starts. The bus pulls out of the station and onto the road. Colleen Stan is on a bus to Sacramento. She is free. She does not believe it yet. She will not believe it for hours, maybe days. But it is true. After 7 years in captivity, after 7 years as a slave, after 7 years believing that escape was impossible and that her family would die if she tried, she is free. The psychological prison has been demolished. The company never existed. Master lied about everything. She rides the bus for 3 hours. She gets off in Sacramento. She finds a payphone. She has enough change. She dials her father's number. The phone rings. Her father answers. She speaks. Dad, it's me. I need help. I need you to come get me. Colleen's father, Donald Stan, drives from his home in Northern California to Sacramento to pick up his daughter. The phone call confused him. She sounded scared. She sounded strange. She asked him to come immediately. She did not explain why. He got in his car and drove. He finds her at a coffee shop near the bus station. She is sitting at a table in the corner. She looks thin. She looks years older than she should. She's 27, but she looks 40. Her hair is long and unkempt. Her clothes hang on her frame. Her eyes are wide and darting, looking at every person who enters as if expecting someone specific. She sees her father. She stands up. He walks to her. He hugs her. She feels fragile in his arms, like she might break. He asks what is wrong. She does not answer yet. She asks if they can go somewhere private. He says yes. They walk to his car. They get in. He starts driving toward his home. She sits in the passenger seat, staring out the window. After 15 minutes of silence, she begins to talk. She tells him she was kidnapped 7 years ago. She tells him the couple who picked her up hitchhiking took her and kept her. She tells him they kept her in a box. She tells him they tortured her. She tells him about the company lie and why she believed she could not escape. She tells him about the slavery contract. She tells him about Master. Donald Stan listens. His mind rejects what he is hearing. This cannot be true. His daughter has been calling them on the phone for years. She visited them in 1981. She seemed fine, or at least she seemed strange, but not like someone being held captive.
How could she have been a slave kept in a box?
How could this happen in America in the 1970s and 80s?
How could no one know?
But he looks at his daughter's face. He sees the truth in her expression. He sees the damage. Something terrible happened to her. She is not making this up. This is real. His daughter was kidnapped and enslaved for 7 years while he thought she was just living in Red Bluff, working a job. He asks if she wants to call the police. She hesitates. She is still afraid. She is still not completely certain the company does not exist. What if calling the police triggers retaliation? What if Master finds out? What if this is all still a test? But her father encourages her.
He says they need to call the police.
He says the people who did this need to be arrested. She agrees. When they reach his home, they call the police. The Tehama County Sheriff's Department sends a deputy to interview Colleen. The deputy's name is Paul Smith. He arrives at the Stan residence with a notebook and a skeptical expression. He has heard a lot of strange stories in his career. This one sounds stranger than most. A woman claims she was kept in a box for 7 years. A woman claims she worked a job and visited family while being a slave. A woman claims she believed in a fake organization that controlled her through psychological manipulation. It sounds implausible.
It sounds like a mental health issue rather than a crime, but he listens.
He takes notes. Colleen tells him everything. She tells him dates. She tells him addresses. She tells him about the mobile home at 1140 Oak Street in Red Bluff. She tells him about the boxes, the one under the waterbed, the one in the shed. She tells him about the torture devices. She tells him about Cameron and Janice Hooker. She tells him about their children. She tells him details that are too specific and consistent to be delusions. Deputy Smith asks if she can take them to the house. She says yes. She's terrified to go back there, but she says yes. The next day, August 10, 1984, Colleen rides with Deputy Smith and another officer to Red Bluff. She directs them to Oak Street. She points out the mobile home. She points out the shed in the backyard. The officers ask if anyone is home. She does not know. The officers approach the door. Cameron answers. He sees Colleen standing behind the officers. His expression does not change. He shows no surprise, no alarm, no guilt. He is calm. He asks how he can help them. The officers explain that they have received a report of a kidnapping. They would like to ask him some questions. They would like to search his property. Cameron says certainly. He lets them in. Janice is inside with the children. She sees Colleen. She does not look surprised either. She knew this would happen. She freed Colleen knowing it would lead to this moment. She is prepared for it. The children stare at the police officers. They do not understand what is happening. The officers search the house. They find the waterbed. They lift the frame. They find the box underneath, the plywood box, with dimensions of 2 feet by 3 feet by 2 feet. The box is empty now, but its existence is undeniable. They photograph it. They measure it. They take samples of the material. They go to the shed. Colleen shows them which building. They open the door. They find the second box, the larger one, with the shelf and hooks and magazine pictures taped to the walls. They find restraints. They find whips. They find electrical devices. They find the head box, the wooden cube lined with carpet that was placed over Colleen's head during abductions and torture. They find the rack. They find photographs of Colleen in bondage. They find the slavery contract with her signature. The evidence is overwhelming. This happened. This is real. This is not a delusion. This woman was kept in boxes for 7 years. She was tortured. She was enslaved. And these two people, this ordinary-looking couple with children, did it. Cameron and Janice are both arrested on the spot. They are read their rights. They are handcuffed. They are placed in separate patrol cars. The children are taken into protective custody temporarily. Social services will sort out what happens to them. The mobile home becomes a crime scene. Officers spend hours documenting everything, photographing everything, collecting evidence. Colleen stands outside, watching. She is free. She is actually free. The company did not come for her.
Master is in handcuffs.
The lie is destroyed, but she does not feel relief. She feels numb. 7 years of captivity do not end with a moment of triumph. 7 years of psychological conditioning do not disappear because the captor is arrested. She is out of the box, but the box is still in her mind. The Tehama County District Attorney's Office takes the case. The lead prosecutor is a man named Donald Stall. He reviews the evidence collected from the mobile home. He interviews Colleen extensively. He interviews Cameron and Janice separately. What emerges is a picture of a crime so bizarre and so sustained that it challenges belief. The investigative challenge is not proving that Colleen was held captive. The physical evidence proves that conclusively. The challenge is explaining why she did not escape when she had opportunities. The challenge is proving that Cameron Hooker is responsible criminally when Colleen had access to phones, worked a job, and visited family without revealing her situation. The defense will argue she was a willing participant. They will argue this was a consensual relationship. They will argue she could have left at any time. Prosecutor Stall knows he needs expert testimony. He needs psychologists who can explain coercive control. He needs experts who can testify about brainwashing and psychological manipulation. He contacts Dr. Chris Hatcher, a psychologist at the University of California, San Francisco, who specializes in trauma and captivity. Dr. Hatcher agrees to evaluate Colleen and provide expert testimony at trial. Dr. Hatcher
Spends dozens of hours interviewing Colleen.
He administers psychological tests. He reviews the evidence. He examines the slavery contract. He studies the photographs. He analyzes the timeline. His conclusion is clear. Colleen Stan was subjected to systematic psychological torture designed to break her will and make her compliant. The techniques used were similar to those used on prisoners of war, cult members, and victims of domestic abuse. The company lie was a sophisticated form of thought control that created a mental prison more effective than any physical restraint. Dr. Hatcher writes a detailed report explaining learned helplessness. He explains how repeated torture teaches a person that resistance is futile. He explains how isolation from outside information makes the captor the sole source of reality. He explains how creating an external threat, the company, transfers the victim's fear from the immediate captor to an unseen, omnipotent organization. The victim begins to see the captor as a protector against an even worse fate. This is how Cameron controlled Colleen, even when she had physical freedom. The investigation also uncovers Cameron Hooker's background. Police search his home more thoroughly. They find books on brainwashing. They find manuals on interrogation techniques. They find magazines about slavery and bondage. They find evidence that Cameron had been planning to kidnap a woman long before May 1977. He built the first box before kidnapping Colleen. He studied psychology and conditioning. This was premeditated and methodical. Janice Hooker presents a complicated problem for prosecutors. She was present during the kidnapping. She helped maintain Colleen's captivity. She participated in torture sessions. She is culpable, but she is also the key witness. Without Janice's testimony, the case becomes harder to prove. Colleen's testimony alone might not be enough to convict Cameron beyond reasonable doubt. The defense will attack her credibility. They will argue she is mentally ill. They will argue she is lying. Janice can corroborate everything Colleen says. Prosecutor Stall makes a deal with Janice Hooker. In exchange for her complete cooperation and testimony against Cameron, she will receive immunity from prosecution. She will not be charged with kidnapping, false imprisonment, torture, or any other crimes related to Colleen's captivity. This decision is controversial. Many people believe Janice should be prosecuted. She helped kidnap Colleen. She kept her imprisoned for 7 years. She tortured her. But the prosecutor makes a tactical choice. Convicting Cameron is more important than punishing Janice. Janice agrees to the deal. She provides a full statement. She confirms everything Colleen said. She describes the kidnapping in detail. She describes building the boxes. She describes the torture. She describes Cameron's obsession with slavery. She describes her own participation and her own guilt. She admits that she wanted to free Colleen sooner, but was afraid of Cameron. She admits that Cameron's plan to kidnap another woman was the breaking point that finally motivated her to act. Cameron Hooker, meanwhile, says nothing. His lawyer advises him not to speak to police. He is charged with multiple counts including kidnapping, rape, forcible oral copulation, penetration with foreign objects, and sodomy. The charges carry a potential sentence of life in prison. Cameron shows no emotion during his arraignment. He enters a plea of not guilty. His defense strategy begins to form. The victim cooperated willingly. She had opportunities to leave. She chose to stay. This was a consensual relationship. The case is scheduled for trial in 1985. The trial will be long and complex. It will require explaining to a jury how a woman could be enslaved for 7 years in plain sight. It will require convincing 12 ordinary citizens that psychological control can be as absolute as physical chains. It will be a test of whether the American legal system can recognize and punish psychological torture as thoroughly as it punishes physical violence. The trial, 1985. The trial begins in March 1985 in Red Bluff. The courthouse is packed. Media from across California and beyond have descended on this small town to cover what newspapers are calling the girl in the box case. The story has captured national attention. It is sensational and disturbing. It raises questions about the nature of captivity, the power of psychological manipulation, and how such horror could exist unnoticed in an ordinary neighborhood. Judge J. David Knight presides. Prosecutor Donald Stahl represents the state. Defense attorney Roland Papendick represents Cameron Hooker. The jury is 12 men and women from Tehama County, ordinary people who will be asked to understand extraordinary evil. The trial lasts several weeks. The prosecution's case is methodical and detailed. Prosecutor Stahl begins with the physical evidence. He shows the jury photographs of the boxes. He shows them the head box. He shows them the torture devices. He shows them the slavery contract. He shows them photographs Cameron took of Colleen in bondage. The physical evidence establishes that the captivity happened. There is no dispute about that basic fact. Then Colleen testifies. She takes the stand for 3 days. She describes the kidnapping on Highway 299. She describes the first night in the mobile home. She describes the box under the waterbed. She describes 7 years of torture and captivity. She describes the company lie and why she believed it. She describes working at the motel while still returning to the box every night. She describes visiting her family in Oregon and coming back because she believed they would be killed if she did not. The defense attorney cross-examines her aggressively. He asks why she did not scream for help at the motel. She explains she was afraid of the company. He asks why she did not tell her family during her visit. She explains she was afraid they would be killed. He asks if she had opportunities to escape. She says yes, but explains that escape seemed impossible because of the psychological control. He asks if she ever said no to Cameron. She says she learned quickly that saying no resulted in torture, so she stopped saying no. The defense attorney tries to paint her as a willing participant. He points out that she called Cameron master, even when working at the motel. He points out that she signed a slavery contract. He points out that she returned to captivity after visiting family. He implies that she chose this lifestyle, that she was a consensual submissive in a relationship that got out of hand, that she is now regretting her choices and falsely claiming she was kidnapped. This is the crux of the defense strategy. If the jury believes Colleen cooperated willingly, Cameron cannot be convicted of kidnapping or false imprisonment. The defense does not deny that sex acts occurred. They do not deny that Colleen was kept in boxes. They argue it was consensual. They argue she could have left. They argue she chose to stay. Prosecutor Stahl counters with expert testimony. Dr. Chris Hatcher takes the stand. He explains his evaluation of Colleen. He explains post-traumatic stress disorder. He explains learned helplessness. He references experiments by psychologist Martin Seligman where dogs were given electric shocks they could not escape. The dogs eventually stopped trying to escape even when escape became possible. They learned that resistance was futile. This is what happened to Colleen. She learned that escape was impossible, and that lesson became so deeply ingrained that even when physical escape became possible, the psychological barriers remained. Dr. Hatcher compares Colleen's situation to prisoners of war in Korea and Vietnam who were brainwashed by captors. He compares it to cult members who are psychologically controlled by cult leaders. He compares it to victims of domestic abuse who stay with their abusers even when they have opportunities to leave. He explains that the human mind can be imprisoned as thoroughly as the human body. He explains that the company lie created a mental cage with no exit. The defense cross-examines Dr. Hatcher. They try to undermine his credibility. They point out that brainwashing is controversial in psychology. They point out that some experts dispute whether it exists. They argue that Colleen was not brainwashed. She was simply making choices. Bad choices, perhaps, but choices nonetheless. Dr. Hatcher maintains his position. He states unequivocally that Colleen was subjected to systematic psychological torture designed to eliminate her capacity for independent decision-making. Then Janice Hooker testifies. This is the testimony the prosecution needs. Janice is the other person who was there. She confirms everything Colleen said. She describes the kidnapping. She describes building the boxes. She describes participating in torture. She describes Cameron's obsession with slavery. She describes the company lie as something Cameron invented specifically to control Colleen. She admits her own guilt. She admits she should have freed Colleen years earlier. She admits she was complicit. The defense attorney attacks Janice viciously during cross-examination. He points out that she received immunity in exchange for testimony. He suggests she is lying to save herself. He suggests she is the real mastermind and is blaming Cameron to avoid prosecution. He points out that she was present during all the torture. He points out that she sometimes participated. He asks why the jury should believe anything she says when she is admitting to being an accomplice to kidnapping and torture. Janice maintains her testimony. She says she is telling the truth. She says Cameron was the leader and she was following his orders out of fear. She says she was also a victim of Cameron's abuse. She says she finally freed Colleen when she realized Cameron planned to kidnap another woman. She says she knows she did terrible things, but she is trying to make it right by testifying. The jury hears from co-workers at the motel where Colleen worked. They testify that she seemed quiet and normal. They noticed nothing unusual. They had no idea she was being held captive. This testimony cuts both ways. The defense uses it to argue that Colleen was not behaving like a captive. The prosecution uses it to demonstrate how effective the psychological control was. She could appear normal in public while still being completely controlled. The jury hears from Colleen's family members. They testify about her visit. In 1981, they say she seemed nervous and thin. They say something seemed off. But she told them she was fine. She gave no indication she was being held captive. They had no reason to suspect anything. They feel guilty now for not pushing harder, for not investigating, for accepting her assurances that everything was okay. The jury hears from police officers who searched the mobile home. They describe finding the boxes. They describe the evidence. They describe Cameron's calm demeanor during the arrest. They describe the children living in the home, having no idea that a woman was being kept in a box in the shed behind their house. The prosecution rests. The defense presents its case. They call character witnesses for Cameron. Co-workers from the lumber mill testify that he seemed like a normal guy. He did his job. He talked about his family. He seemed like any other worker. The defense tries to create doubt about whether this normal-seeming man could really be guilty of such bizarre crimes. The defense calls a psychologist who disputes Dr. Hatcher's testimony. This expert argues that learned helplessness is not applicable to this case. This expert argues that Colleen had too many opportunities to escape for the situation to be considered true captivity. This expert suggests Colleen may have had psychological issues that predisposed her to remain in an abusive situation, but that does not make her a kidnapping victim. Cameron Hooker does not testify. His lawyers advise him to remain silent. If he takes the stand, the prosecutor will cross-examine him about the boxes, the torture devices, the slavery contract, the photograph. There is no good answer he can give. His best strategy is silence. Closing arguments take a full day. Prosecutor Stoll summarizes the evidence. He reminds the jury of Colleen's testimony. He reminds them of Janice's testimony, or he reminds them of the physical evidence. He reminds them of Dr. Hatcher's explanation of psychological control. He argues that Cameron Hooker kidnapped a woman, tortured her systematically for 7 years, and controlled her so completely through psychological manipulation that she believed escape was impossible even when physically possible. He argues this is kidnapping. He argues this is rape. He argues this is evil. Defense attorney Papendick argues that the prosecution has not proven its case beyond reasonable doubt. He argues that Colleen had too many opportunities to escape. He argues that working a job, making phone calls, and visiting family are not actions of a kidnap victim. He argues that she could have told anyone at any time. He argues that she chose not to. He argues that her choice to remain, for whatever psychological reasons, means this was not kidnapping. He argues that without kidnapping, the other charges fall apart. He asks the jury to acquit. The jury deliberates for 8 days. This is an unusually long deliberation. It suggests the jury is struggling with the central question: was Colleen a victim or a participant? Can someone who had opportunities to escape still be considered a kidnap victim? Is psychological control equivalent to physical captivity in the eyes of the law? On November 22, 1985, the jury returns with a verdict. The courtroom is packed. Colleen sits in the front row. Janice sits on the opposite side. Cameron sits at the defense table, showing no emotion. Judge Knight asks the jury foreman to read the verdict. Guilty on all counts. Guilty of kidnapping. Guilty of rape. Guilty of forcible oral copulation. Guilty of penetration with foreign objects. Guilty of multiple charges that carry decades in prison. The jury deliberated for 8 days, but ultimately decided that psychological captivity is real, that learned helplessness is real, that a person can be imprisoned in their own mind as securely as behind bars. Cameron Hooker shows no reaction. He sits motionless as the verdicts are read. Colleen begins to cry. These are tears of relief, of validation, of finally being believed. The legal system has recognized what happened to her. A jury of 12 ordinary citizens heard her story and believed her. Cameron Hooker will go to prison. He will not kidnap another woman. He will not build more boxes. He will not torture anyone else. Sentencing occurs several weeks later. Judge Knight sentences Cameron Hooker to 104 years to life in prison.
Multiple counts with multiple sentences running consecutively.
Cameron will be eligible for parole after 36 years. In 2022, he is 29 years old at sentencing. He will be 65 years old before he can even apply for parole. He will likely die in prison. Janice Hooker walks free. She receives no prison time due to her immunity deal. She changes her name. She takes her children and disappears from public life. Some people view this outcome as just. She was also a victim of Cameron's abuse, and she ultimately freed Colleen. Others view it as a miscarriage of justice. She participated in kidnapping and torture, and should be in prison regardless of her cooperation. The controversy persists for decades. Colleen Stan walks out of the courtroom a free woman in the fullest sense. She is no longer a captive physically or legally. The man who enslaved her is in prison. The system worked. Justice was served, but she is not healed. The trial is over, but her recovery is just beginning. Freedom does not feel like freedom at first. Colleen Stan walks out of the courtroom in November 1985 legally vindicated but psychologically shattered. 7 years in captivity, followed by a year of investigation and trial, have left her with trauma so deep that normal life seems impossible. She is 28 years old. She has lost her entire 20s to a man who convinced her she was property. The immediate challenge is physical safety. She needs a place to live. She needs money. She has no job. Her last employment was at the motel where she worked while enslaved. She has no savings. Cameron kept all her earnings. She has no possessions beyond the few items she owned when she was kidnapped 8 years earlier. She moves in with her father temporarily. She applies for victims' compensation from the state of California. The process is slow and bureaucratic, but eventually she receives some financial assistance. The psychological challenges are more complex. She suffers from severe post-traumatic stress disorder. She has nightmares every night. She dreams she is back in the box. She dreams the company is real and agents are coming for her. She wakes up screaming. She wakes up disoriented, unsure if she is in her father's house or in the mobile home on Oak Street. Sleep becomes something to fear rather than something restorative. She has panic attacks in public spaces. Too many people around her triggers fear. Being in enclosed spaces triggers memories of the box. She avoids elevators, closets, small rooms. She needs doors to remain open. She needs to know she can leave any space at any time. The concept of being trapped, even voluntarily, even temporarily, sends her into spiraling anxiety. She has difficulty with authority figures. Anyone giving her orders triggers conditioning from her captivity. A supervisor at a job telling her to complete a task sounds too much like master giving a command. She has to consciously remind herself that she is free, that she can refuse, that obeying is optional now. But 7 years of conditioning where disobedience meant torture has created neural pathways that do not disappear quickly. She enters therapy. Her therapist is a woman named Dr. Patricia Brown who specializes in trauma recovery. Dr. Brown uses a combination of talk therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy to help Colleen process what happened to her. The work is slow and painful. Colleen has to revisit the trauma repeatedly in order to heal from it. She has to talk about the box, the torture, the fear. She has to examine her own actions and choices during captivity. She has to forgive herself for not escaping when she had opportunities. The self-blame is intense. Even though the trial established legally that she was a victim, even though experts testified that psychological control eliminated her ability to choose freely, Colleen still blames herself. She thinks she should have been stronger. She thinks she should have seen through the company lie. She thinks she should have told her family during that week-long visit in 1981. The rational part of her mind knows this is unfair. The emotional part of her mind does not care about rational thinking. The emotional part says she was weak and stupid and deserves what happened. Dr. Brown works with her on understanding learned helplessness. They discuss the research. They discuss how repeated, inescapable trauma teaches the brain that resistance is futile. They discuss how Cameron systematically destroyed her ability to think independently. They discuss how brainwashing works and why intelligent people fall victim to it. Slowly, over months and years, Colleen begins to internalize that what happened was not her fault. She begins to understand that she survived using the only tools available to her. She begins to see herself as strong rather than weak, but recovery is not linear. She has good days and bad days, good weeks and bad weeks. Sometimes she feels like she is making progress. Sometimes she feels like she will never be normal again. The term normal itself becomes complicated. What is normal for her now? She cannot go back to who she was before May 1977. That person is gone. She has to build a new identity as someone who survived something unsurvivable. In 1987, 2 years after the trial, Colleen meets a man named John. He knows her story. Everyone in Northern California knows her story by now. The media coverage was extensive, but John sees her as a person rather than as a victim. They start dating. The relationship is difficult. Colleen has trouble with physical intimacy. Touch reminds her of torture. Affection reminds her of Cameron demanding obedience. She has flashbacks during intimate moments. John is patient. He learns what triggers her. He learns how to support her through panic attacks and nightmares. They marry in 1989. Colleen thinks marriage might help her feel normal. She thinks creating a life with someone might help her move past the trauma. They have a daughter in 1991. Colleen names her daughter Jessica. Becoming a mother is healing in some ways and terrifying in others. She loves her daughter intensely. She also fears constantly that something will happen to her. She checks on Jessica multiple times each night. She has nightmares about someone kidnapping her daughter. The trauma does not disappear with motherhood. It transforms into hypervigilance and overprotectiveness. The marriage struggles under the weight of Colleen's trauma. John tries to be supportive, but he does not fully understand what she is dealing with. He has not experienced captivity. He has not experienced torture. He cannot truly comprehend the psychological damage. They argue about her anxiety. They argue about her need for control. They argue about intimacy. In 1995, they divorce. The divorce is amicable. They remain co-parents to Jessica. But Colleen recognizes she is not ready for a long-term relationship. She is still too broken. She works various jobs through the 1990s. She works as a caregiver for elderly people. She works in retail. She works as a house cleaner.
Nothing feels like a career. Everything feels like survival.
She makes enough money to support herself and Jessica.
That is the goal.
She avoids media attention. She avoids interviews. She wants to disappear into ordinary life. She wants to be known as something other than the girl in the box, but the box follows her.
People recognize her.
Co-workers whisper.
Strangers stare.
Some people are sympathetic. Some people are curious in ways that feel invasive. Some people ask questions she does not want to answer. Why did you get in the van with them? Why did you not escape when you had the chance? Why did you sign the slavery contract? These questions feel like accusations. They feel like the cross-examination never ended. She moves several times trying to escape recognition. She moves from Red Bluff to other small towns in Northern California. She uses her married name instead of Stan to avoid being immediately identified. But the story follows her. The internet makes it worse. In the late 1990s, websites begin appearing dedicated to true crime. The girl in the box case is featured on multiple sites. Photographs of her taken from news coverage during the trial circulate online. Her story is told and retold, often with inaccuracies, often with sensational details that overshadow the reality. By the end of the 1990s, Colleen has achieved a fragile stability. She is employed. She is raising her daughter. She is in therapy. She is sober and functional. But she is not thriving. She is surviving. There is a difference. Thriving would mean feeling joy, feeling hope, feeling like the future holds possibilities beyond just making it through each day. Survival is all she can manage. The Colleen Stan case has ripple effects far beyond the individuals involved. The trial and conviction of Cameron Hooker established legal precedent about psychological captivity. Before this case, kidnapping law focused primarily on physical restraint. The Colleen Stan case demonstrates that psychological restraint can be equally effective and equally criminal. This precedent influences how courts handle future cases involving domestic abuse, human trafficking, and cult involvement. Psychologists study the case extensively. Dr. Chris Hatcher publishes papers about Colleen's captivity. He uses the case to illustrate learned helplessness and coercive control. The case becomes a teaching example in psychology courses. Students studying trauma, abuse and captivity learn about the girl in the box. The case helps establish that psychological manipulation can destroy a person's ability to make free choices just as thoroughly as chains and locks. The case influences law enforcement training. Police officers learn to recognize signs of psychological control. They learn that victims who do not immediately flee their captors may still be victims. They learn that asking, "Why didn't you just leave?" is not productive because victims of coercive control often cannot leave even when physically able to do so. The case changes how missing persons investigations are conducted and how recovered victims are interviewed. Victim advocacy groups use the case to educate the public about coercive control. Organizations working with domestic violence survivors reference the case when explaining why abuse victims stay with abusers. Organizations working with human trafficking victims reference the case when explaining how traffickers control victims psychologically rather than just physically. The case becomes shorthand for the concept that captivity can exist without visible chains. But the case also generates controversy. Some people refuse to believe that psychological control can be as absolute as Colleen claimed. Some people argue that she had too many opportunities to escape and her failure to do so means she chose to stay. Some people argue that the trial verdict was wrong, that Cameron was convicted of crimes that were actually consensual acts between adults. This controversy persists for decades. Internet forums and true crime communities debate the case. Some defend Colleen, some blame her. The arguments mirror the defense strategy at trial. Was she a victim or a participant? The controversy intensifies around Janice Hooker's immunity deal. Many people believe Janice should have been prosecuted and imprisoned. She helped kidnap Colleen. She helped build the boxes. She participated in torture. The fact that she eventually freed Colleen does not erase 7 years of complicity. Victim advocacy groups are divided. Some argue that Janice was also a victim of Cameron's abuse and should be treated with compassion. Others argue that being a victim does not excuse becoming a perpetrator. The debate about Janice's culpability continues into the 2000s. Cameron Hooker becomes eligible for parole in 2022 after serving 36 years. His parole hearing generates significant media attention. Colleen writes a letter to the parole board opposing his release. She states that Cameron remains dangerous. She states that he showed no remorse during the trial or during his decades in prison. She states that releasing him would put other women at risk. The parole board denies Cameron's parole. His next hearing is scheduled for 2027. The mobile home on Oak Street in Red Bluff is demolished in the 1990s. The property is sold. A new structure is built. Nothing remains of the physical location where Colleen was held captive except photographs in evidence lockers. The boxes themselves are preserved in a California evidence warehouse. They are occasionally loaned to law enforcement training facilities for educational purposes. Officers see the actual boxes, see the dimensions, understand viscerally how small and confined they were. True crime media discovers the case repeatedly over decades. Television shows produce episodes about the girl in the box. Documentary filmmakers make films. Podcasts discuss the case. Each retelling brings renewed attention to Colleen. She finds this attention painful. She did not ask to be famous. She did not ask to be a cautionary tale. She just wants to live her life. But her story is too compelling. The media will not let it go. In 2009, Colleen makes a decision that surprises everyone who knows her. She agrees to participate in a documentary about her captivity. The documentary is titled The Girl in the Box and is produced for Investigation Discovery. For 24 years since the trial, Colleen has avoided media attention. She has declined interviews. She has hidden from cameras. But now, at age 52, she decides to tell her story in her own words. Her reasons are complicated. Partly, she wants to control the narrative. Too many versions of her story exist, some accurate, some wildly inaccurate. She wants people to hear the truth directly from her. Partly, she wants to help other victims of coercive control understand that they are not alone and not to blame. Partly, she needs the money. Documentaries pay participants, and she is still struggling financially. And partly, she thinks that facing the story publicly might be therapeutic. Maybe owning it rather than hiding from it will help her heal. The filming process is grueling. She has to revisit the mobile home location, not the actual building, which no longer exists, but the street and neighborhood. She has to describe the boxes in detail. She has to explain the torture. She has to talk about the company lie and why she believed it. She has to answer the question everyone asks, why did you not escape? She has to answer it for cameras, knowing that millions of people will watch and judge her answer. The documentary airs in December 2009. The response is overwhelming. Some viewers are sympathetic and supportive. Some viewers are skeptical and judgmental. The internet explodes with discussion. Forums and comment sections fill with debate. Some people praise Colleen's bravery for coming forward. Some people accuse her of lying or exaggerating for attention. The experience is re-traumatizing in many ways, but it also brings unexpected connections. Colleen receives letters from other survivors of coercive control, women who escaped cults, women who survived domestic abuse, women who were trafficked. They tell her that her story helped them understand their own experiences. They tell her they felt less alone after watching the documentary. They tell her she saved them by speaking publicly. These letters make the pain of going public feel worthwhile. Colleen begins doing occasional speaking engagements. She speaks at conferences about trauma and recovery. She speaks at law enforcement training sessions about recognizing coercive control. She speaks at victim advocacy organizations. She is not a natural public speaker. She is nervous and uncomfortable on stage, but she feels a sense of purpose in educating people. If her suffering can help prevent someone else's suffering, then maybe it meant something. Her daughter Jessica, now an adult, is supportive of her mother's decision to go public. Jessica grew up knowing her mother's story. Colleen never hid it from her. She told Jessica age-appropriate versions of what happened as Jessica grew older. Jessica understands why her mother has nightmares. Jessica understands why her mother is hypervigilant. Jessica sees her mother as a survivor rather than as damaged. This perspective helps Colleen see herself differently too. In 2014, a Lifetime movie is made about the case. The movie is titled The Girl in the Box and stars Addison Timlin as Colleen. Colleen does not participate in the production beyond selling the rights to her story. She watches the movie once. It is surreal seeing an actress portray her, seeing the boxes recreated, seeing the kidnapping reenacted. The movie takes liberties with some details for dramatic effect. Some events are compressed. Some dialogue is invented. But the core story is accurate. The movie introduces Colleen's story to a new generation of viewers. The movie reignites public interest in the case. Media outlets request interviews. Colleen grants a few. She appears on talk shows. She gives interviews to newspapers and magazines. She has become more comfortable talking about what happened. Time has created distance. She can discuss the events without completely relapsing into trauma. She can answer questions without breaking down.
This is progress.
Colleen Stan is 67 years old in 2024. She lives in Northern California in a small town she prefers not to name publicly. She works part-time doing clerical work for a local business. She lives alone in a modest apartment. She has a few close friends who know her history and accept her. She has a complicated relationship with her daughter Jessica, who is now in her early 30s with children of her own. Colleen is a grandmother. This gives her joy. She still has PTSD. The nightmares are less frequent than they were in the 1980s and 1990s, but they have not disappeared entirely. She still has panic attacks occasionally. She still avoids enclosed spaces when possible. She still needs doors to remain open. The trauma is managed rather than cured. She has accepted that she will never be completely free of it. The box is gone physically, but it remains mentally. She has learned to live with this reality. She has not remarried. She has had a few relationships over the years, but none have lasted.
Intimacy remains difficult.
Trust remains difficult. The idea of letting someone have power over her, even the normal power dynamics in a relationship, triggers fear. She has made peace with being alone. Alone feels safer than vulnerable. She has forgiven Janice Hooker. This surprises people when she says it. Janice helped kidnap her. Janice kept her imprisoned. Janice participated in torture. But Colleen understands that Janice was also a victim of Cameron's control. Janice was abused. Janice was manipulated.
And ultimately Janice freed her.
Without Janice driving her to that bus station and telling her the truth, Colleen might still be in captivity.
Cameron might have kidnapped other women.
Janice's decision to free Colleen was courageous, even if it came late. Colleen forgives her. She has not forgiven Cameron Hooker. She does not think forgiveness is possible for what he did. He systematically destroyed 7 years of her life. He tortured her.
He enslaved her.
He turned her into property. He felt no remorse. He showed no guilt. He did it because it gave him pleasure and power.
This is unforgivable.
Colleen does not waste energy hating him. Hate gives him power, and she refuses to give him any more power over her. But she does not forgive him. She simply wants him to remain in prison for the rest of his life. Cameron Hooker's next parole hearing is in 2027. Colleen will oppose his release again. She will write another letter. She will attend the hearing if her health allows. She will tell the parole board that Cameron remains dangerous. She expects they will deny parole again.
Cameron is now 70 years old.
He has spent more years in prison than he spent free. He will likely die in prison. This gives Colleen satisfaction. Janice Hooker disappeared from public life after the trial. She changed her name. She took her children and moved to another state. Colleen does not know where Janice is. She has not spoken to Janice since the trial. She has no desire to speak to her. Forgiveness does not require contact. Colleen forgives Janice from a distance. She hopes Janice found some peace. She hopes Janice's children are okay. But she does not need to see Janice again. Colleen's life now is quiet and simple. She works. She sees her daughter and grandchildren occasionally. She watches television. She reads books. She gardens in a small plot behind her apartment building. She attends therapy monthly instead of weekly. She takes medication for anxiety and depression. She has a cat named Misty. These are the components of her life: ordinary, mundane, peaceful. After 7 years in a box and decades of recovery, peaceful is enough. She thinks about the woman she was before May 19, 1977 sometimes. That woman was 20 years old, hitchhiking to a birthday party, making decisions about which rides felt safe and which did not.
That woman had good instincts. That woman trusted herself.
That woman was independent and confident. That woman disappeared on Highway 299 when she got into a blue van with a couple and their baby. Colleen mourns that woman. But she also recognizes that mourning her is pointless. That woman is gone. What remains is someone different, someone who survived, someone who endured, someone who rebuilt a life from wreckage. She does not consider herself inspirational. When people tell her she is brave or strong, she feels uncomfortable. She does not feel brave. She feels like someone who had terrible things happen to her and is doing her best to cope. Bravery implies choice. She had no choice about what happened to her. She only had choices about how to survive it. She chose to survive. That does not feel brave. That feels like the only option, but she understands that her story helps people. She understands that other survivors see themselves in her experience. She understands that her willingness to speak publicly educates people about coercive control. She understands that her case changed laws and police procedures. She understands that Cameron Hooker's conviction established precedent that protects future victims. Her suffering was not meaningless. It created change.
It saved others.
This gives her some sense of purpose. She has been asked many times what she would say to her 20-year-old self standing on Highway 299 about to accept that ride. She has no good answer. She could say, "Don't get in the van," but that seems obvious and unhelpful. She could say, "Trust your instincts," but she did trust her instincts. A couple with a baby seemed safe. She could say, "You are about to experience something terrible, but you will survive it." But would that help? Would knowing the future change the past? She does not know. She only knows that she survived. She only knows that the girl in the box grew up and grew old and found some version of peace. She only knows that the box was real and the company was not. She only knows that psychological prisons are as real as physical ones and harder to escape. She only knows that she escaped anyway, eventually, with help. This is what she wants people to understand. If they understand nothing else about her story, she wants them to understand that coercive control is real. She wants them to understand that people who do not escape when they have opportunities may still be captives. She wants them to understand that asking, "Why didn't you just leave?" is the wrong question. The right question is, what made you believe you couldn't leave? The answer to that question explains everything. Colleen Stan will carry the box with her for the rest of her life. But she also carries something else, proof that survival is possible, proof that recovery is possible, proof that human beings can endure incomprehensible evil and still build lives on the other side of it. This is her legacy.
Not the suffering.
The survival. The wooden box that sat under the waterbed at 1140 Oak Street in Red Bluff no longer exists in that location. The mobile home was demolished decades ago. The property changed hands multiple times. A new structure sits where Cameron and Janice Hooker once lived with their children and their slave. Nothing visible marks the location as significant. No plaque commemorates what happened there. The neighborhood has moved on, but the box itself still exists. It is stored in a California Department of Justice evidence warehouse along with the second box from the shed, the head box, the torture devices, the photographs, and the slavery contract. These items are occasionally loaned to law enforcement agencies for training purposes. Police officers and FBI agents see the actual boxes. They see how small they are. They see the crude construction. They see the dimensions that made standing impossible and stretching difficult. They see physical proof that a human being was kept in these spaces for years. The boxes serve as teaching tools. Instructors use them to explain coercive control. They use them to demonstrate that captivity does not always look like chains and dungeons. They use them to train officers on recognizing psychological manipulation. The boxes have educated thousands of law enforcement personnel over the past 4 decades. In this way, Colleen's suffering continues to serve a purpose long after her captivity ended. True crime enthusiasts sometimes make pilgrimages to Red Bluff. They visit the street where the mobile home once stood. They take photographs. They post on social media about visiting the location. Some locals find this ghoulish and disrespectful. Others understand the impulse. People want to see the place where something incomprehensible happened because seeing it makes it real. The human mind struggles to accept that such horror can occur in ordinary places. Standing on Oak Street makes it concrete. The case remains one of the most discussed kidnapping cases in American history. It appears regularly on true crime podcasts, documentary series, and educational programs. Each retelling introduces Colleen's story to new audiences. Each retelling generates new discussions about coercive control, victim blaming, and the nature of captivity. The case refuses to fade from public consciousness. It remains relevant because the questions it raises remain unanswered for many people. The Colleen Stan case fundamentally changed how psychologists, law enforcement, and the legal system understand psychological captivity. Before this case, kidnapping was primarily understood as physical restraint, victims tied up, locked in rooms, guarded constantly. The idea that a victim could be controlled so completely through psychological
Means that physical restraint became unnecessary was not widely
recognized. The case demonstrated that the human mind can be imprisoned as securely as the human body. The techniques Cameron Hooker used were not invented by him. They were adapted from documented methods of brainwashing and coercive control used by cults, by totalitarian regimes on political prisoners, by military interrogators on prisoners of war. These techniques are well studied. They are understood by psychologists. They work. The components of effective coercive control include isolation from outside information, creating dependence on the captor for basic needs, systematic use of fear and punishment, establishing arbitrary rules that must be followed, occasional unpredictable rewards to create hope, and most importantly, creating an external threat that makes the captor appear as a protector rather than the primary threat. Cameron Hooker applied all of these techniques to Colleen Stan. The company lie was the external threat. Colleen came to see Cameron not as her primary danger, but as the person standing between her and the even greater danger of the company's retaliation. This dynamic appears in many abusive situations. Domestic abuse victims often stay with abusers because the abuser has convinced them that leaving would be more dangerous than staying. Cult members remain in cults because they believe leaving would result in divine punishment or harm to their families. Human trafficking victims often do not attempt escape because they believe their families will be killed or they will be deported or arrested. The specific lie varies, but the psychological mechanism is the same: fear of something worse than the current situation. The Colleen Stan case provided concrete
evidence that these psychological mechanisms can be as
effective as physical restraint. The jury at Cameron Hooker's trial heard expert testimony explaining these concepts. They heard about learned helplessness. They heard about trauma bonding. They heard about how repeated inescapable punishment teaches the brain that resistance is futile. They heard about how isolation eliminates reality checks that might break through the captor's constructed reality. The jury believed this testimony. They convicted Cameron of kidnapping despite the defense argument that Colleen had opportunities to escape. This verdict set legal precedent. It established that psychological coercion can constitute kidnapping even without physical restraint. It established that victims who do not escape when physically able to do so can still be considered captives if they were psychologically unable to make that choice. This precedent has influenced hundreds of subsequent cases involving domestic violence, human trafficking, and cult-related crimes. Prosecutors reference the Colleen Stan case when arguing that their victims were psychologically controlled. Defense attorneys reference the case when arguing their clients were brainwashed into criminal behavior. The case created legal vocabulary for discussing psychological captivity. The case also changed public understanding. Before Colleen Stan, the general public widely believed that victims who did not escape when they had opportunities must have wanted to stay. The case forced people to confront the reality that psychological control can eliminate the ability to perceive escape as possible. The question, "Why didn't she just leave?" began to be recognized as a question that misunderstands how coercive control works. Victims do not just leave because their perception of reality
has been altered to the point where leaving
seems impossible or more dangerous than staying. This understanding has spread beyond the criminal justice system. Domestic violence advocates use the Colleen Stan case when educating the public about why abuse victims stay with abusers. Human trafficking organizations use the case when explaining why trafficking victims do not simply walk away. Mental health professionals use the case when treating patients who have experienced coercive control. The case has become foundational to understanding psychological captivity across multiple fields. Cameron Hooker is 70 years old in 2024. He has been incarcerated for 39 years. He is housed at California State Prison Corcoran, a maximum security facility in the Central Valley. He has been denied parole twice, once in 2022 and once in 2024. His next parole hearing is scheduled for 2027. Prison records indicate that Cameron has been a model prisoner. He has no disciplinary infractions. He works in the prison library. He participates in educational programs. He attends religious services. By all outward appearances, he is a rehabilitated individual who has accepted responsibility for his crimes and transformed himself during his decades of incarceration. But psychological evaluations tell a different story. Prison psychologists who have evaluated Cameron describe him as having antisocial personality disorder with sadistic features. They describe him as someone who understands intellectually that what he did was wrong legally, but who does not experience genuine remorse emotionally. They describe him as someone who learned to present as reformed in order to improve his chances at parole, but whose fundamental personality structure has not changed. During his 2022 parole hearing, Cameron made a statement expressing regret for his actions. He apologized to Colleen Stan. He said he had spent decades reflecting on what he did and understood the harm he caused. He said he had found religion in prison and asked God for forgiveness. He said he wanted the opportunity to spend his remaining years as a productive member of society. Colleen submitted a written statement opposing his release. She stated that Cameron's apology was hollow and calculated. She stated that his behavior during the trial showed no remorse. She stated that he had shown no genuine signs of change. She stated that releasing him would endanger women. She stated that he would reoffend if given the opportunity. The parole board agreed with Colleen. They noted that despite Cameron's clean disciplinary record, his crime was exceptionally heinous and calculated. They noted that he had planned the kidnapping in advance, built the box before acquiring a victim, and studied brainwashing techniques to maximize his control. They noted that he showed no mercy to his victim over 7 years. They noted that his psychological evaluations indicated continued risk. They denied parole and set his next hearing for 2 years later. The 2024 hearing followed a similar pattern. Cameron made essentially the same statement. Colleen submitted essentially the same opposition. The parole board denied parole again. At this rate, Cameron Hooker will likely die in prison. Each denial sets his next hearing 2 to 3 years in the future. He is 70. Even if he eventually receives parole in his 80s, he will have spent the majority of his life incarcerated. Some people believe this outcome is just. Cameron Hooker destroyed 7 years of Colleen Stan's life and decades more through lasting trauma. He deserves to spend the rest of his life in prison. Others believe that after 40 years of incarceration, particularly with a clean disciplinary record, continued imprisonment serves no purpose. The debate about appropriate punishment for crimes like this continues. Cameron has never provided a complete explanation for why he did what he did. He has never explained where the impulse came from. He has never explained what he gained from torturing another person. His psychiatric evaluation suggests he has sexual sadism disorder, a recognized paraphilia where sexual arousal is associated with inflicting suffering on others. But that diagnosis explains the mechanism, not the origin. What creates a person who derives pleasure from another's agony? Psychiatry has theories, but no definitive answers. Cameron's childhood was troubled.
His father was abusive. His mother was neglectful.
He exhibited warning signs as an adolescent: cruelty to animals, fascination with bondage, social isolation. These factors correlate with later sadistic behavior, but they do not fully explain it. Millions of people experience difficult childhoods.
Most do not become torturers.
Something in Cameron's psychology combined with his experiences to create a person capable of extreme cruelty. What that something is remains unclear. This uncertainty troubles people. We want to understand evil. We want to identify it early and prevent it. We want to believe that people like Cameron Hooker are fundamentally different from us in ways we can recognize. But Cameron was not obviously monstrous. His co-workers saw him as a normal guy. His neighbors had no suspicions. He functioned in society. He held a job. He raised children. And simultaneously he kept a woman in a box in his shed. The banality of his evil is perhaps more disturbing than if he had been obviously deranged. Janice Hooker received full immunity for her testimony against Cameron. She was never charged with kidnapping, false imprisonment, torture, or any other crime related to Colleen's captivity. This remains controversial. Victim advocacy groups are divided. Some argue that Janice was herself a victim of Cameron's abuse and should not be punished for actions she took under his control. Others argue that being a victim does not excuse becoming a perpetrator, and that Janice actively participated in kidnapping and torturing another woman for 7 years. After the trial ended in 1985, Janice divorced Cameron. She took her children and moved to another state. She changed her name. She has not spoken publicly about the case since her trial testimony. She has not given interviews.
She has not written a memoir.
She has not appeared in any of the documentaries about the case. She has maintained complete silence for nearly 40 years. This silence is understandable. Speaking publicly would expose her to criticism and possibly harassment. It would force her to relive trauma. It would potentially damage her children's ability to build normal lives. Silence protects her and protects them. But it also means that Janice's perspective remains largely unknown. She testified at trial, but her testimony was carefully circumscribed by what prosecutors needed to convict Cameron. Her inner life during those 7 years, her motivations for participating, her decision-making process when she finally freed Colleen, these remain mysterious. Some people have tried to find Janice over the years. Journalists have searched. True crime investigators have searched. They have found nothing conclusive. Janice changed her name and successfully disappeared. Her children, now adults in their 40s, have also remained silent. They were young during Colleen's captivity. They did not know what was happening. Learning as adults that their father kept a woman in a box in their backyard must have been devastating. They have chosen not to speak about it publicly. This choice is respected by most people, but frustrates those who want complete understanding of the case. Colleen has stated that she has no interest in speaking with Janice. She has forgiven her but does not need contact with her. Forgiveness for Colleen meant releasing anger and resentment that were causing her continued pain. Forgiveness did not mean excusing what Janice did. It did not mean absolving Janice of responsibility. It meant Colleen choosing to not carry the burden of hatred anymore. This is a personal choice. Other victims of similar crimes might make different choices about forgiveness. There is no correct way to process trauma. The question of Janice's culpability will never be fully resolved. The legal system gave her immunity. The prosecutor made a tactical decision to prioritize convicting Cameron over punishing Janice. That decision can be argued either way. What cannot be argued is that Janice made a choice to help kidnap Colleen. She made a choice to help build the boxes. She made choices to participate in torture. These were choices. Whether they were choices she felt she could refuse given her own victimization by Cameron is a separate question. Both things can be true. Janice was a victim, and Janice victimized someone else. The lack of accountability for Janice troubles people who believe justice was incomplete. Cameron was punished appropriately. He will die in prison. But Janice walks free. She experienced no legal consequences for her actions. The only consequences she faced were losing her marriage, losing her community, and having to live with guilt. For some people, this is insufficient justice. For others, it is appropriate given that she ultimately saved Colleen by freeing her and testifying against Cameron. There is no perfect answer to the Janice question. The legal system made a choice based on practical considerations about securing a conviction. That choice can be second-guessed but cannot be changed. Janice received immunity. She honored that immunity agreement by testifying fully and truthfully. The legal process is complete. Whether it was just is a matter of perspective. At the core of the Colleen Stan case is a question that extends far beyond the specific facts of her captivity. The question is, how do human beings survive unsurvivable circumstances? How does a person endure 7 years in a box and emerge with their sense of self intact? How does trauma that should destroy a person instead become something they carry and live with? Colleen's answer to this question has evolved over decades. Immediately after her escape, she would not have been able to answer it. She was too close to the trauma. She was still in survival mode. She was still processing what had happened. In the early years of recovery, she might have said she survived. Through dissociation, mentally going somewhere else during torture, creating an internal world where she could be safe even when her body was not safe. Later, in therapy, she might have said she survived through hope. She believed at various points that she might be rescued, that the authorities would find her, that someone would intervene. These hopes were mostly false, but they kept her alive. Hope, even irrational hope, gives people reason to endure another day. Without hope, despair leads to giving up. As more time passed and Colleen gained perspective, she might have said she survived through adaptation. She learned the rules of her captivity. She learned how to minimize punishment. She learned how to endure pain. She learned how to preserve some small core of self that Cameron could not reach, no matter how thoroughly he controlled her body and behavior. This adaptive capacity is what ultimately allowed her to recognize freedom when Janice offered it. Now at 67, Colleen's answer is simpler and more profound. She survived because human beings are extraordinarily resilient. The human capacity to endure suffering is vast. The human ability to adapt to terrible circumstances is remarkable. This is not inspiration or motivation. This is biology and psychology. Humans evolved to survive. When survival requires enduring horror, humans endure horror. When survival requires creating psychological distance from unbearable reality, humans create that distance. When survival requires continuing to function despite trauma, humans function despite trauma. This resilience is not limitless. Many people do not survive their traumas. Many people who survive physically are destroyed psychologically. Many people who survive and recover still carry wounds that never fully heal. Colleen herself carries wounds. She has PTSD, she has anxiety, she has difficulty with intimacy and trust. She is not undamaged, but she is alive. She is functional. She built a life after captivity. This is what survival looks like in reality. Not triumph, not transcendence, but continuing to exist and finding moments of peace within that existence. The question of how people survive impossible circumstances is relevant far beyond Colleen Stan's case. It is relevant to Holocaust survivors, to prisoners of war, to refugees fleeing violence, to anyone who has endured prolonged suffering. The answer is always some combination of hope, adaptation, dissociation, and the fundamental biological drive to survive. Understanding this answer helps survivors understand themselves. It helps them recognize that their survival strategies, whatever they were valid and necessary. It helps them release guilt about actions they took or did not take during their trauma. Colleen has said in interviews that she wants people to understand this above all else. Survival is not heroic, and survivors are not heroes. Survival is simply what happened. She did not choose to be kidnapped. She did not choose to endure torture. She did not choose psychological manipulation. These things were inflicted on her. What she chose was to not die. What she chose was to keep existing through impossibility. This is not heroism. This is the baseline of human experience, to continue living even when living is unbearable. If there is a lesson in Colleen Stan's story, it is not that suffering makes people stronger, or that trauma leads to growth, or that surviving impossible circumstances is inspirational. The lesson is that psychological prisons are as real as physical prisons. The lesson is that coercive control can eliminate free will as effectively as chains. The lesson is that people who appear free may not be free. The lesson is that asking, "Why didn't you just leave?" misunderstands how captivity works. And perhaps most importantly, the lesson is that recovery from severe trauma is possible, but not inevitable and not complete. Colleen recovered enough to build a life. She has a daughter and grandchildren. She has friends. She has work. She has moments of happiness. But she also has nightmares. She also has panic attacks. She also lives with doors open because closed doors trigger memories of the box. Recovery is not returning to who you were before trauma. Recovery is becoming someone new who carries the trauma but is not consumed by it. This is what Colleen Stan accomplished. She did not overcome her trauma. No one overcomes trauma of this severity. She learned to live with it. She learned to function despite it. She learned to find meaning in her survival by helping others understand coercive control. This is as close to triumph as trauma survivors can realistically achieve. The boxes are in storage. The mobile home is demolished. Cameron Hooker is in prison. Janice Hooker is silent. Colleen Stan is alive and 67 years old. These are the facts of the present moment, but the story extends beyond these facts. The story is about what humans can do to other humans when power is absolute and accountability is absent. The story is about how the mind can be imprisoned more thoroughly than the body. The story is about how ordinary-looking people can contain extraordinary evil. The story is about how survival is possible even when it should not be. The girl in the box is not truly a girl anymore. She is a woman who has lived most of her life outside of captivity. The box defined 7 years.
It does not define all 67.
She is more than what happened to her. She is what she became after what happened to her. She is a survivor in the fullest sense, someone who survived not just the immediate horror, but also the decades of recovery that followed. Her story will continue to be told as long as people want to understand coercive control, as long as people want to understand survival, as long as people want to understand why victims do not just leave. The answers are in her story. The answers are uncomfortable and complex. They require accepting that free will is not absolute, that minds can be controlled, that evil exists in ordinary places, that survival looks different than we imagine. These answers matter. They matter for other victims who need to understand they are not weak or stupid for not escaping. They matter for law enforcement who need to recognize psychological captivity. They matter for prosecutors who need to prove cases where physical restraint was minimal but psychological control was absolute. They matter for anyone who has ever asked, why didn't they just leave? And needs to understand why that question is wrong. Colleen Stan's survival does not make what happened to her acceptable. It does not redeem the suffering. It does not create meaning from senseless cruelty. But it does demonstrate that humans can endure more than we think possible and still remain human on the other side. This demonstration matters. It gives hope to those currently surviving impossible circumstances. It creates understanding in those who have never experienced such circumstances. The box was real. The company was not. The captivity was 7 years. The recovery is ongoing. The story is true. These are the essential facts of the girl in the box, a case that changed law, psychology, and public understanding of what captivity means. A case built on one woman's suffering and survival. A case that will remain relevant as long as coercive control exists in the world, and coercive control will exist as long as humans have power over other humans and choose to abuse that power. Colleen Stan's story is a warning about what happens when power meets sadism and psychology meets torture. It is also proof that survival is possible. Both lessons matter. Stories like this one, true accounts of psychological captivity and survival against impossible odds, are what the narrow escape exists to tell. From kidnapping victims to hostage survivors, from cult members to prisoners of war, these are the moments when ordinary people endured extraordinary evil and found ways through. Every week we bring you a new story, researched thoroughly, told carefully, and always true. If Colleen Stan's 7 years in a box held your attention, there are dozens more stories waiting, each as compelling, each as impossible, each as real as the woman who survived slavery in plain sight in Red Bluff, California, and lived to help others understand how psychological prisons work. Subscribe to The Narrow Escape for more true stories of survival, escape, and the refusal to accept impossible odds. Because sometimes the strongest prison has no walls at all, and breaking free from those prisons requires understanding how they were built in the first place.